It's just us today.
Yay! I miss just us, actually.
Me too. I think sometimes we have more fun just playing off of each other, but that's what today is.
Yeah. Um, I do think it's fun to meet people and to learn about their stories and what they're doing and learn a little bit about their skill set or whatever. But there's also something more vulnerable about when it's just the two of us.
Yeah, I agree. I do enjoy hearing other people's perspectives and just kind of having our fun twist in there, but having the foundation we have with our friendship, I think it makes it a lot easier for us to just open up and explore things more organically and naturally. And I feel like that's what a lot of people are missing. So, yeah, vulnerable hits.
Um, and with the word vulnerable, you made an excellent point just now. Hopefully, this podcast is just full of those today.
Would love that.
Um, but you said the foundation of our relationship, and it reminded me of, oh, you weren't on that one. I did a podcast with this woman, Crystal, who was a relationship expert and couples counselor, sex therapist, all those things.
Hmm.
And she talked about the foundation of a relationship being safety. And she said, people think that the foundation of relationships is trust, but it's actually safety, and you can't have trust without safety. So I think you were saying that we have a nice foundation where we do feel safe with one another.
100%. Like it's such an interesting thing to explore things like vulnerability, trust, or safety because it's kind of one of those like when you know you have it, you know, but you also know when you don't have it, but the time in between when you're building it, you don't necessarily recognize until you're on the other side of it, you know?
Yeah.
Like I couldn't pinpoint when I started to feel safe with you. Um, but it is one of those cool things once you do have it where like you can say really, really honest things to me that probably most people can't because there's this built-in trust and safety of like you have my best interest at heart. You're not going to say something that you know would hurt me. Like I believe that wholeheartedly. And if you did have a human moment where you did say something that hurt me, I would tell you, and I'm more than confident you would understand it, apologize, and we would repair, right? And vice versa. So it's a really cool thing when you do have it because it opens up a more honest space for vulnerability. So I actually do like that because Brene always talks about how vulnerability is the foundation of connection.
Mm,
And I can see the ladder of like, it's a hard thing because a lot of times, chicken egg, does vulnerability breed safety? Does safety breed vulnerability? You know?
yeah. Well, what I tell my clients is if you're trying to find out if it's safe to be vulnerable with someone, you give them little nuggets. So it
Mhm.
does come with a level of vulnerability, but you test it out with things that aren't as severe or serious to you, I guess, than
Yeah.
you don't want to dump your deepest, darkest stuff right away. However, I do think you and I did that immediately.
We may have. We
Our
may,
first
I
dinner,
know.
I remember saying to you, well, since we're talking about our traumas,
So here's an interesting thing because it's very, very possible. And I will say, like, I've learned, like, through personal training that if you open with something vulnerable, like a lot of personal trainers are looked at as like they eat perfectly. Newsflash, no, they don't. So I always wear my donut socks, right? And people be like, "You're wearing donut socks?" I'm like, dude, you trying to tell me you don't like donuts? Like, I will lift, but don't deny me my donuts. And that almost touched on their vulnerabilities around food. And so I learned like being open about some of the things that are maybe misconceptions and like sharing things that I could predict almost that they would be vulnerable about created easier bonds. Now, it wasn't something I was conscious to. It was something that kind of felt more intuitively guided. Plus, who doesn't like donuts? Um, and then with you, like you're a therapist, I'm a coach. So like we're both in that arena. We both clearly have some interest in there. So I don't know how we got there. It does not at all surprise me because how I play it off is like if someone is adding context to the conversation around something deeper like that, that kind of is like a different type of nugget. So like to your point, I agree. Like, and I've said the same things to my clients, like kind of got to give them like little nuggets. But I think there are also two other ways to observe, experience, whatever.
Okay.
One, kind of tangential to like what you're talking about, sharing a nugget that's maybe not as like a 2 out of 10 versus a 10 out of 10. But I've even gone as far as if I'm trying to build with someone, I might go to someone like you, regulate, etc., and then go to them to see how they respond. So like I do it from a stable space to
Mm,
see would they be a safer place in the future. Um, I've also gone as far with certain people who I know want to be able to be like that space for me, but don't necessarily know how to be really specific about like this is what I need. So I know they love me, but I don't know if they have the skills all the time. And so that's where that's that like blended space, right? Um, but I think what happened with us is we started sharing ideas and you were adding context. So it was like building like a little tower of we're thinking the same way. We kind of understand things the same way. Like there's shared ideology.
yeah.
And I mean, we both talk about trauma a lot, so I'm not surprised that that got in there, right?
Day one.
I mean, I'm pretty sure
To
day
be
two, you
clear, we
texted
don't
me.
necessarily recommend that, but it did
Yes,
work for us.
unless you're us, don't do that. No, trust your instincts for that one.
There you go. I think that's important. And you mentioned that with the personal training that it was like intuitively led.
Sure. Yeah. Like, and you can tell by people's gestures, like, are you leaning in when I'm talking about that? Are you laughing at like my jokes around it? Or is that more of a serious, sensitive space, right? Like gauging people's body language to understand where they are too, because it's a mutual thing. It's not just the can you be safe for me, but am I overwhelming you? Do you like if you're in a limited capacity space and I unload on you and you have a bad reaction, that's just as much my responsibility as it would be yours. I didn't ask where you were. I didn't say, can you hold some space for me? You know? So like how are you supposed to know I'm about to dump all this stuff on you?
Yeah.
It's a bridge. So like it's a two-way street in a lot of this stuff, which makes it challenging, but also beautiful and unique. And like that's the freaking journey, you know?
Well, you also mentioned something else that I think is really important, and that is the ability to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, I think, well, obviously, first of all, you want to have some kind of connection first. And if vulnerability builds the connection, then we should be able to also have a conversation. But since Laura and I are friends, we did hang out recently. And because we're both freaking nerds,
Hmm.
what we did on our hangout was listen to Brene
It
Brown.
was, and get cookies, guys, and get cookies, just so we're clear. Totally worth
Very
it.
true, very true. We both listened to Brene Brown and had cookies.
Yeah.
And she was talking about leadership and one of the important qualities of leadership being the ability to have hard conversations.
Hmm.
So since then, I've been doing some brainstorming around the fact that, like, yeah, nobody does teach us how to have hard conversations. I can have vulnerable conversations easily because for me, I don't
Question.
hold a lot of shame around, yes.
Your vulnerability in those conversations or people being vulnerable with you? I'm curious because if we're talking about having courageous conversations, I'm wondering, is it because like if you can because I've seen it, I've seen you have vulnerable conversations with me, hold space for me. I've seen you also be vulnerable with me. Don't think that took courage, but some of the other aspects of non-trusted, non-safe people, is it the vulnerability that, do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, and I said, you got me stumped over here. I'm like, damn, I don't know. What is the fear? It is a
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah,
I think maybe it's a fear around reaction, but like
that makes sense.
there's no logical reason for it because nobody's beating me up for saying what I, because I'm not,
Yeah.
although I haven't been trained in how to have hard conversations with Brene Brown, which I would love to be, uh,
Same. You hear that, Brene? Call us.
give me a call. Um, I do have some training on communication and, listening and, word choice, things along those lines. So
Mhm.
I can have a conversation and I'm not gonna come off super aggressive. But there's still a lot of fear around having those conversations.
Okay, I think you helped me get there. I think because I think I experience it similarly that I can have vulnerable conversations, be that uh, others' vulnerability or mine, but then there's a different tier for me of vulnerability, kind of like we were talking about with the nuggets, right? Like there's a 2 out of 10 versus a 10 out of 10 is gonna have a different threat perception or fear perception. So I can have a 2 out of 10 conversation with someone who I maybe don't have safety or trust with and be okay. But if it's a 10 out of 10, and I think that's like what is courage? It's your ability to move through fear, right? So a 2 out of 10, sure, technically you're still being courageous, but it's only relatable to like your experience of fear. So even in the context of how we were thinking, like having to give feedback in a professional sense, that could be negative, right? I've had to deal with the same thing and I get really uncomfortable, which I don't think is bad. I think it makes me more conscious and more intentional about like what I want to say and how I want to say. I know for me, how I operate is miscommunication feels like it's inevitable
Mm,
because people have so much shit
right.
that I really focus on like, okay, what's the problem I'm actually having? Not necessarily, I want to make sure it's not like the symptom, you know? Like we used the example joking around before we started recording, like the wife isn't mad that the towel's on the floor. She's upset because she feels disrespected because she's repeatedly asked you to pick up the towel from the floor, right? It's the feeling of disrespect that's the problem, not the towel. So when I'm trying to deliver whatever that feedback is, I try to make sure like, what am I actually trying to deliver? Am I annoyed with the towel or is it the disrespect that I want to make sure I'm communicating around?
Mm,
And honestly, then I just understand like they're probably going to misunderstand me. And I just need to make sure I'm crystal clear about like what I want to be said and the messages I want to get across. So if they push anything back at me, like, so you're saying I'm not doing a good job, I can be like, I think we're having a misunderstanding. Um, I'm not saying I don't think you're doing a good job. I'm saying I don't understand components of this. I see your effort and there's a gap that I don't understand, and I would like more clarity and something like that, right? But that's because I know for a fact I'm not saying in my circumstance, you're doing a bad job. That's not what I'm saying. Now, if you are doing a bad job, that's a totally different conversation. How do you deliver that?
yeah.
And
One of the most uncomfortable conversations that I can recall is needing to tell someone that their hygiene was not on point. And like so uncomfortable.
yeah.
How the hell do you say that? And it's not like I can't find the words, right? I
Oh
can
yeah.
find the words, but how do you deliver this message in a way that can be heard and not immediately met with defense or shame or,
Yeah.
like and those are the things that we're up against when we're having a hard conversation.
Yeah.
Defensiveness is probably inevitable. Um, like you
Blame.
said, misunderstanding is inevitable. There could be blame, and then there could be shame
Yeah.
and
There
just
could even be guilt.
yeah.
Like, do you remember in the podcast when Brene gave the example of like how to communicate? And like we even looked at each other in the car, like, no, no one talks like that. Um, I agree that no one talks like that, and I think that's part of the problem. And I think the only way for us to make that more of the culture is one by one, you, me, listeners, to like start practicing it because her whole example was about, I think, change management. Like a boss gets notified that the project they've been working on for however long, they have to shift course. And she kind of presented it as like, hey guys, I want you to know how much I appreciate everything that you've been doing. You have I told you what we needed to do, and you guys have worked diligently. Your effort is valued, all this positive stuff, right? And I just found out today from my superiors that this is now being kind of shelved, and we need to shift to whatever we're going to be doing. Before we do that, putting your effort and your time and your energy into a project that then gets shelved naturally stirs up some stuff. So I want to give us a little bit of space to just kind of like air that out because that is hard and it does suck. And that's not a reflection of anything you've done, but you deserve to be seen for your effort. And this is just kind of one of those business things, but like the human in you deserves to be seen. Like I'm not quoting her perfectly, right? But like that was kind of like what I took away from it. Am I kind of there?
Yeah, absolutely. Creating space for people to have a human reaction to something before you just move past it.
So I'm wondering for us if that's part of the courageous conversations. Is like understanding for ourselves, like clear, kind, direct feedback is what Renee ultimately says is good leadership, is being clear and kind. So saying like this has not met my expectations, or I feel like I'm being manipulated because I've been told one thing, but the actions I'm receiving are not aligned with that. And understand, and I think that's part of for, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's part of what we both struggle with in those conversations is like we're so aware of how hurt people can feel, and we don't want to hurt them, but that doesn't mean denying our reality either.
Oh no, is this part of the people pleasing plague?
Kinda,
Oh,
probably.
damn.
I think that's part of the like okay, if we didn't have the safety and trust
Yeah.
and I said something to you like, I really enjoy working together, but the professionalism isn't there for me or something. I don't know. Uh, so I'm not sure that this is going to work. I mean, I'm having a hard time insulting. Can you give me something to insult
I'm
you
gonna
with?
be honest, the professionalism wouldn't be there.
Perfect. Let's go with that. All right. But see, this is why we work, guys, because like I'm like a flowy thing, and Alicia will tell me where I need to flow to sometimes, and it's great, and I have fun. It's an adventure. We got lost at Dakota.
Yes.
Was it Dakota?
Yeah, I was supposed to turn on Delaware and I turned on Dakota because they're obviously the same place.
Yeah. But don't worry, guys, we found the cookies. That's what matters. Um, Now, not to squirrel,
Yeah.
but I really enjoy our work together, but the lack of professionalism isn't working for me, so I don't know if we can continue. Like, because I love you so much, like that would suck to say, but also if someone's telling you that you're not professional, that isn't me,
I
would
have
that
been told that, believe it or not.
what would your human reaction be? Or
I
what has
was,
it been, I
of
suppose?
course, defensive. I mean, I don't think I said anything. I think I maybe asked some questions at the time. And, for me, I think I also have delayed responses sometimes. Like it takes me a minute to even process what's going on. So after the conversation with my bosses, um, I remember being frustrated and still unclear on what exactly I wasn't doing.
Hmm.
I figured it out eventually, but yeah, I definitely felt defensive. I definitely felt confused and probably hurt. I was probably hurt too, like, ooh,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not doing well enough.
And I think like I mean, this is coming to my brain as we're talking. Like I think maybe that's what we both can hold each other accountable for is like remembering when we do go have these hard conversations, like no one likes to hear they're doing a bad job. No one likes to hear you're not meeting my expectation. No one likes to hear that someone that they love feels manipulated by them. Like, yeah, you want them to have a negative reaction. In all honesty, isn't that like healthy psychological like experience?
That's true.
So I think it's really to have courageous conversations. It's understanding like you are going to get a negative reaction, but that's not a bad thing. It's what you do next that matters.
Meaning, like, if you just fold and give in because now you feel bad that the person's upset.
Right. Or
Um,
if you're like, if you get defensive to their defensiveness, or if you attack them, or if you're stonewall or you don't answer their questions, like if it's like, if I say like you're not being professional and I'm like, and you come back with defensiveness, I'd be like, hey, I get it. You clearly show up, you clearly try. There's a gap here that we don't understand. It's not that I don't think you're capable, it's that I think we just got to figure out how to navigate the gap together. So let's try and navigate it together. That's going to instantly disarm whatever defensiveness you originally felt, right?
hmm.
So like I think
But
the
that's if you want to navigate it with somebody, which I
yeah,
guess is the whole point of coaching, right?
yeah, right? It's knowing where to invest that energy and where not to invest that energy.
Yeah.
And it can be like, it's also about like knowing your people when it's from like a business context. Like if you know someone's a processor, like telling them like, hey, I want to have a brief conversation today. I know that you thrive when you have time to process, and I needed to give you some hard, honest feedback, but I have enough respect for you that tomorrow I want to also block off like an hour so that we can talk through it and give you that time to kind of understand it for yourself. Is that okay with you? Right? Like just understanding your people and like painting the vision in the picture because people don't like uncertainty. So if
Yeah.
you give them a degree of certainty, I think that's better. Like it's interesting. I was just at this leadership retreat thing 2 days ago, right? And so we're talking about leadership and how to have courageous conversations, ironically. So wild. And I got like my analysis of my leadership profile. And it's one of the things it said was I'm not good at making decisions and that I think I'm too considerate of other people's feelings.
Hmm.
Not surprised as a former
Kind
people
of
pleaser.
exactly what we're talking about.
What's interesting is I showed it to Scott and he's like, I really disagree with this. And I was like, me too. Why do you disagree? And he's like, I think you're great at making decisions. I think actually the fact that you are aware of people's emotional capacities and where they are actually makes you better at it. And I'm like, I agree. And it makes me slower at it. And I'm okay with that because I would rather give a third or fourth chance and be more frustrated but really see like I've exercised all the things that I know how to do to try and make this work before I put someone through that, so to speak. And if that means I'm not as good at making decisions, okay, people can think that. Like I'm comfortable with a little bit more delay. But what I also voiced was I believe that I am good at making hard decisions, especially emotional ones, because I respect the purpose of emotions. Now, and this is why I like we made that discrepancy between like my vulnerability versus their vulnerability. I'm great at holding space for their vulnerability. No problem. My vulnerability, that's where the courageous part comes in, I think. Because,
Really?
yeah, because I'm not, there's very few people in my life who actually know how to hold a safe space because they're so uncomfortable with me having emotions. And I think it's love, right? Like people who you love, you don't want them to suffer, you don't want them to hurt, right? And so if you fix it, if you make it better, then you're okay. So technically it's like a selfish, subtle, subtext, unconscious thing, but I don't think the intent is negative. I think it's likely from trauma, ironically. But yeah, I don't have a lot of people in my life who can just be like, yeah, that really sucks. That is hard. Like, how are you managing this?
Wow.
I have maybe like three,
Mm.
and you're one of them.
Well, thank God I made the cut.
Congratulations, you made the cut.
Um, yeah, I still don't know which part makes me more uncomfortable. I think it depends on the context because there's
Yeah.
a lot of things that I don't mind admitting. That like I don't have any shame around it. So for me, it's not hard to say this thing, this is something I struggle with or whatever. But obviously, if it's something that I have shame around, then that's a different story. So,
Well, yeah. Well, think about vulnerability, exposure, risk, and uncertainty. So, like, if you're not carrying shame and you're like, why are we even calling that vulnerable?
mm,
Is it actually vulnerable? Do you actually feel exposed?
yeah, I guess not.
I mean, I'm decoding this right here with you, sister. I'm trying to do the same thing. Like, I can have what a lot of people would consider vulnerable conversations, but I've accepted a lot of these things and I'm at peace with a lot of these things. So the topic might be vulnerable to the some, but I also notice and I've learned from Brene, like, everyone's not privy to your vulnerability. And like, I have to recognize who can hold that space for me. Because if you're vulnerable to the wrong people,
Right.
like true vulnerable, like you feel the exposure, you feel the risk, and you get bad reactions and bad responses, which is, it happens a lot because no one likes being told they're doing a bad job. It makes you not want to be vulnerable anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that's also kind of a good component of like recognizing sometimes you might need a bridge. Like if I'm gonna have a vulnerable conversations, there's plenty of time I've called you, talked things out with you, felt a little bit more grounded in my experience, and then went and had the vulnerable conversation because it like limited my vulnerable exposure and like made me feel a little bit more secure in my experience, you know?
That's that's wise. And as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, well, of course it's not just cut and dry. Of course it's like layers of things and it depends on this, it depends on that. And
Never easy.
that's freaking life, right? All these little nuances and but I hope this is something that I'm interested in us exploring more. And I do know that we have some people scheduled that should be able to talk to us about this stuff too. Um, but welcome to the growth show. Laura and I are
Yeah,
growing and trying to grow
we're in
you
it with you.
with us. Yeah.
And literally, we didn't know where this conversation was going to go. When you started talking about the vulnerable conversations, I was like, wait a minute. Because I literally give like speak at conferences about vulnerable things like your self-worth, your judgments, your insecurities, and make people like write them down. But I don't feel vulnerable around those things,
Yes.
you know? So I really think like vulnerable topics versus personal vulnerability that you have to walk through is really important when we define courageous conversations. But I don't think it's bad that it's uncomfortable, is one thing I definitely want to make sure we hear.
Yeah. No, I think discomfort is a part of well, it's part of growth, right? We can't grow without discomfort. So there we go.
And it makes us more intentional.
Yeah.
But let's see what everyone else has to say who comes on the show and talks to us about these types of things.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait for more to unfold.
Mm. Stay
Thank
tuned. It's going to get good.
thank you for your time.
Until next time.
Bye.